We're live. Hello, everybody. This is Dystopia Unmasked with Alex Carberry and myself, Meticulous Prime. Today, we will be talking about the Splinternet and the death of globalism. I will remind you all of a particular article that I read in preparation for this conversation, which is Dreams in Collision. You'll find that in the archives of Dystopia Unmasked. It is from June, let me make sure. It is from June 8th, 2025, penned by Alexander Carberry, Dreams in Collision, in which the Pax Americana is analyzed as well as the Pax Sinica. Some similarities, some differences, some positionalities are then also explored. Have a look in the archives. Pax Americana versus Pax Sinica. The article is from June 8th, 2025 on Dystopia Unmasked. And that is what will be informing me in this conversation today about the Splinternet and the death of globalism. Now, this has been an interesting week. We have the death of Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney, who was said to be not merely the vice president, but the brains and the intent of the Bush presidency, really, where Bush was a figurehead. At least that's what wiser people than I am were saying 20 years ago when he was part of the Bush administration, Bush second administration, Bush Jr.'s administration. How do you, what is your farewell reflection on this man and his impact on the world?
I have been silent because my practice is never really to speak badly of the dead, and I
Hmm.
don't have anything good to say. Um, the man is responsible for the deaths of millions, and I hope that wherever he ends up, that he is repaid in full for the corruption that he spread on the face of the earth.
Hmm.
So I say good riddance. You usually say good riddance to bad rubbish, but I don't think that has sufficient weight to contain the absolute mischief of this man.
The absolute mischief of the man whose personal private interests were interwoven with the interests of Halliburton, a company that came out of the Iraq War enriched. I don't have the numbers in mind anymore, but anyone, yeah, pardon me?
I would say that you have to understand that is how the American elite work.
Hmm.
I mean, the measure, because of the way that the American political system works, for actually you to attain office, you have to be in bed with those guys because you have to be part of that elite. Right? That's how it works. So that is, everybody talks about. Basically, that's when the people around the globe became aware of the way
Yes,
that works.
yes.
Right? But I had been in the habit of researching the business interests of people in the State Department, right, secretaries of state, etc. I had always been in the habit of doing that, and it's always revealing of their policies.
Absolutely right. And as you speak, you remind me of something that I want to show our audience. If
Mhm.
I can produce that image, it's an image that gained some notoriety. Um, Let me see if I can increase it to a point where it's visible. So here is one illustration of what you're speaking of. I don't know if people can see what this oil tanker is named. It is an oil tanker named the Condoleezza Rice, which is one of the at Bush administration secretaries,
Yeah. A-
and
yeah, a black woman with a face like a shark,
well,
and sharp, one of
far
the sharpest intellects in Washington.
within a crooked paradigm, I must say, because
Well,
whenever I
yeah, well, we know that, but I mean, she's sharp.
well, you can be
You listen
very
to
sharp,
Condoleezza. Now, if you listen to Condoleezza um, present her arguments and her analysis, you just have to say shit. I mean,
but I haven't been impressed by her, I must say, because she's a very mainstream analyst with a very strong sort of the intertwined nature of the political economy of the U.S. elite, and her political analysis thwart it and make it actually unusable for the recognition of what really is going on this planet. It's such a um there's a word I'm looking for, self-referential. I'll come. Uh, it's a reflexive kind of intellectual activity where it's not about recognizing the world as it is, but it's about recognizing the utility of the world for our
well, precisely.
particularist interests.
That is what it means to be part of an empire.
Mm, mm,
Right. That's what it
mm.
means to be part of an empire. But based upon her grasp of the institutions, how they work, and how to instrumentalize them
Yeah,
for interest, she's masterful.
I mean,
Right?
decorum. Her decorum is flawless.
Yes, she's actually better at it than Hillary Clinton, right? And Hillary Clinton is, if you want if you want to if you want to compare Hillary Clinton with this anybody in the Senate and Congress, I
Mm,
mean, like who? Hillary Clinton is incredible intellect, pol- politically beyond Machiavellian,
mm,
and she knows how the system works, and she's committed to the system, and she's not unnecessarily breaking ranks, right?
yes.
But Condoleezza Rice, yeah, Condoleezza Rice is smarter.
Near the end of her decade on Chevron's board,
Mm-hmm,
she joined it in 1991 while she was a professor at Stanford University.
mm-hmm,
Chevron cooked up the very responsibly sounding the Chevron way to a strong board, which is something that is worth reading. And yes, there was a Chevron ship called the Condoleezza Rice. And
mm-hmm.
that is quite important to understand the intricacy of the intertwined nature of profiteering energy sector and the leaders of the administration in that particular administration.
I would come back because there's something I would like to bring in,
Yes, please.
because okay, I'm really tired. I'm in recovery, so I haven't written anything, as you've seen.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm actually I decided to listen to narratives about the First and Second World Wars.
All right.
Then I became interested in innovation in the First and Second World Wars, and YouTube is a veritable treasure trove. I get lots of things, and I'm just listening, right? And and I noticed that all of the analysis of innovation was dominated by the American paradigm, and but they were talking about the Wehrmacht and so on, which is because Germany had two armies basically, one built around the SS, and the other one its mainstream army, and 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 yeah, and 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 so I began to become interested in how innovation worked in Germany.
Oh, oh. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Under the constraints, I remember, I don't know whether this played a role. Of course, I'll discover if I listen. But now you've brought a memory. The restraints on Germany, the shackles put on Germany's industrial sector after World War One, that in the Diktat of Versailles. Um, Let me see if I can pull it up. The documentation and the prohibitions of what Germany wasn't allowed to do, which ended up spurring inventiveness in the German engineering class.
Yeah. Well, not only in the German engineering class, because their army could only be 100,000. They
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have tanks. They couldn't have an air force. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they couldn't have chemical weapons.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I can't remember his name. I can't remember the name. There was a general there at the time, and what he did was he decided that he was going to have his officers analyze the war ad infinitum. They must understand strategy. They must understand engineering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the industrial process. They must understand, and they must institutionalize innovation. So innovation became part of the institution of the German army. And they began to rethink doctrine because the First World War is a war of mass, right? You got millions of soldiers and it's static. And
Mm-hmm.
people are just dying day in, day out, disease, rats, it's hell in those trenches.
Mm-hmm.
And barbed wire becomes a major part of war in that war. And so they were now thinking, they said, okay, so they began to think and they began, as they theorized, they theorized of an utterly mobile, flexible war,
Mm-hmm.
right? The Blitzkrieg, when it came, that had 20 years of thinking, right? So
Yes.
everybody was surprised because they weren't doing nothing,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, and, um, and so, but what happened is, was the rise of the dual use technology. German companies like Krupp and Daimler, even Benz, um, they were um, they were at that time producing technology for civilian use
Mm-hmm.
that also had military implications.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that once they had to move over, they could do so quickly because they had already thought it through, right? And the next thing that they did is that they were um, they were collaborating illegally with the Soviets
Mm-hmm.
for training pilots, yeah, and experimenting. So that's why mm, that's why if you when you saw when the Soviets entered the war in Stalingrad, they very quickly were able to adopt basically German strategic doctrine. Yeah,
Yes.
they did so very quickly. I
I
think it was
mean,
two main generals whose names I can't remember right now. I'm too tired for that, but
you're reminding me of so many things at the back of my mind, including because we're speaking of German inventiveness and innovation. And there's an article I read, I think it was in The Guardian some time ago, um, that uh, the Germans fed the world, or how German inventiveness led to the synthesization of ammoniac for agriculture. And that without Germany's invention at the beginning of the 20th century, we wouldn't be able to feed the world the way we are.
no, we wouldn't have the plantations that we have.
And as you mentioned dual use, it clicked in my mind the memory. That the same the same inventor who came up with that solution for agriculture also then dual used his intellect to invent Cyclone B and other such chemicals that have become notorious for their genocidal role.
Well, not only that, but out of the development of fertilizer came the development of the explosives, modern explosives industry. Right?
See,
You can't make you
exactly.
can't sustain howitzers
Mm,
without explosives. Right?
mm,
Um, you need impact shells, right?
mm,
And so that the whole doctrine of basically modern warfare is we owe that. I mean, what the Americans. Okay, so why my interest? Because the Americans were really interested. Okay, the American army worked in a very different way. It didn't have that kind of institutionalized um, innovative culture. So innovations from in the German army came almost from the ground up. It was the officers because the officers were supposed to interpret intent. So
mm,
the general or their superior officers would tell them, "This is the objective."
mm,
Yeah, and based upon that objective, it was seen that the officer should understand intent and be
mm,
flexible in interpreting those orders in order to achieve the objective.
mm, mm,
Right.
mm,
So there was whereas within the British and the American armies, your orders were your orders. You got very detailed orders, right? And initiative was not so much. Initiative was a problem. So
mm,
that so that when your innovation came from the ground up,
mm.
you were as likely to get a medal as a court martial. Okay. Um, black black soldiers who innovated were consistently not credited for their innovation.
Mm, mm,
Um,
mm, mm, mm,
like that, and there were a few. You know,
mhm,
there was a guy who built a telescopic sight for so as a sniper, so that you could shoot at over a mile, right? So
mhm,
about a mile. Yeah, you could see in condition. He built out of bamboo and just glass,
mhm,
right? And that that was able to relieve a siege, and that changed sniper doctrine.
mm,
Right. There was another guy who with the M16 he said yeah it's M16 yeah he
I think the name is coming up at the back of my mind. A very polite fella. Um, yes, it'll come up because
but
I read something about it very recently, so it'll come up to me.
yeah there's
Let's
a
see.
so there was
Eugene
a
Stoner. Eugene Stoner.
Eugene Stoner, genius, absolute genius.
That's him.
Never didn't trade. It wasn't from it in. He was from a workshop. He never had a degree or anything in engineering. Um,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but now it wasn't Eugene. So that rifle, um, it was machined so that the pressure, the pressure, the gas pressure, then can propel the bullet, but then is recycled to keep the mechanism going.
Mm-hmm.
So what he faced was that he had to hit. He had to. He had. He had a target which was beyond his range, and he had been experimenting with a little fix that would
Mm-hmm.
put more of that gas pressure towards the shot.
Yes.
And so he implemented it, but and he killed I think he killed I can't remember how many officers he killed. But yeah, Eugene Stoner is the creator of the M16, but it's not him I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's I can't remember the guy's name. But so what happens here? What happens here is that this guy was as likely to get a court martial for this innovation because he had updated standard. He had basically illegally tampered with the army's material property,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas with the Germans, you will see they were experimenting. So they put concrete, they did, all sorts of things to enhance tank
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
armor,
Mm-hmm.
etc. It was very innovative, and it was on the ground up, and what worked made its way into military doctrine, but it was controlled at the officer level.
All right.
Within the American army, what would happen is that a lot of these innovations didn't happen at the officer level. It happened at privates or NCOs, and they were doing things that could lose them their career.
Mm.
Yeah. So okay. So where am I going? I'm saying that these kinds of but if you listen to the Americans narrating their whole idea of innovation, you would not believe that that was the reality, right?
Yeah.
You would think, actually, you would think that the Americans were employing what the Germans did, and the Germans were like the Americans, right? It was the other way
Mm.
around. So, but
Mm.
so basically, what I'm saying is that after the war, the the German strategies had to be adopted for militaries, dual use technologies, right? Um, so the integration of the military industrial complex in national strategy and in national industrial strategy, that became standard. So coming back to Condoleezza Rice,
Mm.
so you can't expect anything else, right? Because now it's all integrated
Yes.
and necessary. So when people are talking about things like the deep state, etc., I sometimes wonder if they've really been following how
Mm.
the modern state has progressed. This is just how the modern state doctrine is. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's dual use. What is for civilians is also for the military, etc. And so, for that kind of continuity, you have to build in um, technocratic and bureaucratic structures and people in order to make it happen,
Mm.
right? But that's just the way it is. So, and so that there's a level of secrecy which is inherent in in the modern nation state, right? After that, because the lesson of Germany was no, you need there are certain types of military investment must be made,
Mm-hmm.
and innovation that must be made in order to stay ahead,
Yes.
right? Including how you train your officers, right? The
Mm-hmm.
German officers were they were writing papers on the First World War and then running war games, right? Because they couldn't fight, so they were running war games to see how it would work. So it was really experimental,
Mm-hmm.
right? So after that, every army became like that, right? But it meant that every state also became like that, right? But then there's this inherent foreclosure and disavowal because you can't talk about the Nazis like that,
Yes.
right? So that you have to cover it with with narratives. You have to have certain phantasmatic narratives to cover what you're doing,
Yes.
right? Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So in terms of Condoleezza Rice and her ilk and Dick Cheney, I don't want to say his name too much because then I'm going to say things that I should really don't want to say.
I'm just now looking at how much money Halliburton made from the Iraq War, and I'm trying to find a number for our audience. Um, and I have an article from 2013 from the German Spiegel that was pointing out that it looks like in '04, '05, Halliburton made 900 billion, yes, 900 billion US dollars profit from from the war in Iraq. There's nothing funny about it. Huh?
Yeah, but I always wonder why people are surprised, right? What the machinery that I've just described to you,
Yes,
right? How is that going to work? Okay. When
yes.
these guys have been doing that work, right? Because they're absolutely central to it, right? You have to bring them. That is what you bring in, right? And then that gets recycled back into the innovations that are supposed to maintain
Mm-hmm.
that dominance because it's dual use, right?
Yes.
The American doctrine is destroy the infrastructure and we will rebuild it,
That's the
right?
shock
We know what we
doctrine.
lose.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Wait, I'm letting that number that I mentioned in my head go around, and it's kind of it's a bit much. Let me find that article again to um to quote the correct number because it can't quite be that they made 900 billion. That
They
can't.
made they made a lot of money.
I think it's 900 million. That would be more
Yeah.
realistic. I said
That's more
billion.
realistic. 900 billion is not realistic.
Yes.
I don't think
No,
so.
no, no. No, no, no. It's 900 million. Now, excuse. I apologize to the
But I know they
audience.
made a lot of money.
No, but I will find it because it was an insane amount of money, and I think it is
Yeah.
8 to 900 million, um, and not billion. I apologize for that
But
mistake.
I think that it's more important that we grasp um what Foucault's work because Foucault's work is like okay that you have to perform an archaeological excavation of how um power actually works, what happens, how it's built, what's going on, right? And you have to understand what the narrative is doing.
Sorry, I have it now. It's 900. So Halliburton pocketed 960 million US dollars for the reconstruction of the oil sector in Iraq.
Hmm.
That is the benefits, that's the profits that Halliburton basically made from the Iraq war. And Dick Cheney was doing the splits between the US vice presidency and Halliburton in some undisclosed ways.
What they all do,
Mm. The
right?
revolving door kind of energy.
Yeah, they all do. They all do. So
Mm.
they all do. It's not. This is not strange at all. If you
Mhm.
are not like that, you cannot become vice president. You cannot become. You can't sit in the. You can't lead the State Department,
Mm.
right? Because the what we have to understand is that in the modern state or in the modern developed state, European developed state, that industry and and the private sector are indistinguishable from the state, right? And I know what the title of the podcast of the live is, and I don't think that
Splinter.
we're talking about we're
No,
there.
but it's fine. I think we can get there. Of course, the Splinternet and the death of globalism, and we
Hmm.
are looking at a central aspect of the globalism part. In my very short 2-minute read article on Substack, well, article essay on Substack,
Hmm.
I point to the uh, antiquatedness of our understanding of power structures.
Hmm.
We speak of division of power, where we say that it's the legislative, the juridical, and the executive branch, and that is what power and the management of power in government consists of. And if we look at it with much, mm, with with a little bit of experience of reading politics, we understand that it's not just those three dimensions. There is what you are talking about, which is the political economy, the strings attached to these, the primacy not of the political, not of the representative function of the political sphere in the legislative branch. The legitimacy is told to the masses, accrues to politicians through the participation of the masses in a democracy and in a republic. But the reality is that transnational corporations
Mm-hmm.
have undercut, have usurped the primacy of the political. You have a primacy of the
No, 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 they haven't usurped it.
It never was, is what you're saying.
No, no, you have to understand that this is exactly what I'm saying. What the Germans discovered is that in order to be able to swiftly build an army for for German purposes was that they had to integrate the private sector into the military and the government. They created the whole idea of the military industrial complex. It is German. Okay. And so once, because they had such hell to defeat the Germans, when they finished, they had to reorganize. And this is what
Mm.
we have, right? It is not that they usurped it. They didn't need to usurp it. You think that the United States could have turned out the industrial output for the war that they did without that integration?
But essentially, we are talking about fascism because, and we're talking about corporatism. The
I don't
Italians
want to. I
named it.
don't want to give it a name. What I want to do, no, I don't want to ideologize it. I
No,
want to look at the 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 bones, the sinews, the muscles of the thing as it is, right? And then when we finish looking, you go, oh, bloody hell! Okay, that's fascism. That's that. That's because you're going to see that it's built in a very, very pragmatic way, right?
mm-hmm.
Some of those decisions are centralized, right? They're centralized decisions. They're not distributed decisions, right?
This is such a fascinating aspect of that conversation because this is now, you know, how many people are surprised when speaking of uh, the speaking of the thanotic practices of the Third Reich. How many people are surprised when we point out, or when an educated, learned, well read mind points out that that was all inspired by the Jim Crow America, by the Ku Klux Klan driven America? That you could basically say the paleo Nazis are the US, and then the Nazis are the Germans, led by the Austrian, and the neo Nazis are whatever we have today, like Elon Musk. But and Elon Musk represents exactly what Il Duce, Mussolini. Just two, three sentences, and I'll leave it to you.
No,
Mussolini
no,
was
I want to come in after you just to highlight your question, right?
right. And so, what Mussolini was pointing out was that the integration of the corporate sector and the executive branch was necessary for the type of governance that we have now come to know as the first fascistic political system in Europe, Italy, 1920s.
Yeah.
And
I think we have to study Gramsci.
oh,
Gramsci is absolutely necessary,
yes, yes.
right? I mean, you don't see. Okay, I before Lacan, I really was into my Gramsci,
Hmm.
right? And the reason is that Gramsci begins to understand the hegemonic nature of the modern state,
Hmm.
how knowledge is produced,
Yes.
how decisions are made, how influence, how different influences work towards the to policy, etc. Right? Because basically, Gramsci is saying that basically in the modern state that you have to you basically have to make your interests policy,
Mm.
right? And then he began to look at how that happens. That's one of the things he says. So in terms of knowledge production, cultural production, in order to make your interest policy. So what 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 we saw, what we've seen is the the transformation of the nature of the state,
Mm-hmm.
right, that legitimated itself by democracy. But at the time it legitimated itself in the democracy, when when in the First World War, America's fighting, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's still a segregated army,
Definitely.
right? They had the same kind of racial ideas about blacks, etc., as the Germans. They were no
And
different.
and in World War II as well.
I was coming to that, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's the point, right? Yeah.
I
So
actually.
in the Second World War, they had they still weren't. They were still segregated, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you want to look at the if you want to the Germans, they didn't even they did not even allow the black soldiers that they had in their army to fight with them in Europe. They seconded them. They gave them to the French. They fought under the French in the First World War. The Germans called them the Hellcats. Yeah. So they because many of them were from Harlem, they then renamed themselves the Harlem Hellcats. Okay, but in that war, they they also they made significant, that regiment made significant tactical innovations, right? Um, but they couldn't fight for the Americans because the Americans would not have them. Then in the Second World War, again they were desegregated, right? The black soldiers had a hell of a time. They performed. I mean, like the Tuskegee Airmen, right? That's one group, but they weren't the only one.
But I have a song. I haven't published it yet. I have a song um, about. It's a storytelling joint about
Mhm.
Tuskegee Airmen from the South flying above the Italian Alps and crash landing there. It'll come out sometime, maybe this year. But I have a song about that.
Good. We're looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but
not to cut you
yeah.
off. I'm listening.
But also we have to. But also the Americans. Then I mean, the amazing thing about the United States, right?
Hmm.
In terms of its understanding of hegemony,
Yes.
is that it used even that
Hmm.
the myth it mythologized that to produce a global black culture.
Yes. Oh, but
I
you have to
say
tell.
that a global black culture is an American invention,
I agree with that.
right?
I
Yeah,
agree, fully agree with that.
yeah. So um, and they did it knowingly. All right, the CIA moved in and involved themselves in that knowingly post the Second World War, and they saw it as a bastion against the Soviets in terms of cultural control of Africa.
Mm.
Right?
What year are we talking?
We're talking from the 1950s,
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
That makes a
I
lot of
mean,
sense. Yeah.
right? So the use of jazz, etc., 1960s, 1970s, the CIA funding. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so where am I going? I'm saying that you're looking at a machinery
Mm.
that, in order to hold hegemony, it can't be that interested in the democratic. It's interested in power,
Yes. I
right?
have a quote. I have a Gramsci quote to underscore what you're saying. Fascism, Gramsci said, is capitalism's emergency solution when the ruling class no longer can govern through liberal democracy.
Yeah,
It's attributed to Gramsci, but I'm sort of a bit skeptical. I would have to have a look at exactly where he wrote that.
yeah. That that seem that smells to me like a very liberal
Right?
translation of Gramsci.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
But essentially, if you can no longer govern through the Weimar Republic, you might slip into fascism. Or my good friend Johann Galtung used to say, um, a powerful nation, a powerful liberal nation on its way down economically usually turns right.
Yeah, but I'm saying something very. I'm saying we have to shift it a bit. This is why I think that the ideological lens is troublesome.
Mm.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
saying that. Okay, what here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that
mm.
the Germans had a problem, and
Yeah,
the Germans solved that problem. And so anybody who wanted to be able to compete with that had to implement a similar solution, right? I'm saying this was not done um, by ideologically. The
yeah.
ideology is veneer over it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This was done out of pure pragmatic power considerations.
Mm.
Right? The Americans, were not tactically superior to the Germans,
Yes.
right? Despite what they would like to tell themselves. The only person who could match the the speed and flexibility of the Wehrmacht was Patton,
Mm-hmm.
right? The Montgomery, you know, again, as not flexible, fixed, boom. Montgomery was like a python,
Mm-hmm.
right? He wrap you up and then he starts to coil and he tightens. So not quick war, slow, methodical, etc. Right
Yes.
now, in the what they had to acknowledge was that this machinery that the Germans had built had the depth. It had industrial depth, right?
Mm-hmm.
It had supply chain depth, and it had its weaknesses. So they were able to, so the Americans won the war by a superior capacity to turn out machinery
Yes.
and men. They won by numbers,
Mm.
right? And building brilliant machinery. I'm not knocking them, right? In the industrial capacity, a lot, the what came at the end of by the end of the war was an industrial machine that could produce that had a doctrine of producing simple but flexible and like the Americans, where the Germans would depend on a few hundred rounds of bullet, right, or shot or round. Right? The Americans bring like 15,000,
Yes.
right? It was, and the Germans realized that they'd lost, and they had lost it was by industrial superiority.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
and doctrinally, the Americans suffered from deep doctrinal problems. They their doctrine didn't allow them to defend those bombers when they were bombing. Right? They had doctrinal problems, and they couldn't correct it within the thing. It was the Tuskegee Airmen who changed the doctrine, right? And then came away that and severely reduced losses of bombers, right? Because it would have been unsustainable in the way that they had been doing it,
Mm.
right? But now the point is that the point is that it was industrial overcapacity, the genius for industrial overcapacity. 'Cause I'm not minimizing what the American genius in the Second World War was, what it
Mm.
showed us,
Mm.
right? Um, um, but I cannot minimize the German one either.
Well,
It would be irresponsible because, and if we do that, we cannot understand what what we are looking at now, because that German step is the necessary step to understand what we were talking about with Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice.
And it goes even a bit further. Dick Cheney, may he rest in in may he rest. And I don't even, well, I mean, 1.5, 1.6 million Iraqis died uh, as a consequence, and were
The war
killed
on terror.
as a consequence on this global war on terror, as they called it, this invasion to retrieve weapons of mass destruction which were never found, to regime change, Saddam Hussein's political system, which led to internal strife between different groups and factions, which led to a toppling of the Sunni secular government that Saddam represented, um, and led to a strengthening of Iran in the region. And there is a video, I think I can find it before we end. There is a video from the early 90s,
Mm-hmm.
from the early 90s of Dick Cheney himself, now that we talk about this, predicting the fracturing and fragmenting of Iraq if there is a military intervention that goes too far and doesn't get to keep the whole political system together. In the 1990s, he himself predicted the implications and consequences of a military intervention, which he presided over, which he headed over as vice president, and the consequences he was afraid of then came to be. But that is neither here nor there. You've spoken about something that brings us to the first word in our title. You've spoken about the integration of the corporate sector into government as an innovation that we now, I'd like to sort of put the spotlight on that. We have a couple of headlines that I'd like to read to you. Big Tech joins the military from June 2025 with Meta, Palantir, and OpenAI now joining the Pentagon. How Big Tech learned to love America's military. Silicon Valley companies are abandoning safety policies to win Pentagon contracts, turning everyday AIs into weapon systems. Another title from Forbes Australia: Meta recruits former Pentagon staff amid growing military um, uh, ambitions. It says Meta is recruiting former Pentagon officials as it ramps up military ambitions. Another title, two more maybe. The Army recruits officers from Meta, OpenAI, and Palantir, and in order to serve in a new detachment at the Pentagon. And a last one from The Guardian: Meta boss praises new U.S. Army division, enlisting tech executives as lieutenant colonels.
Okay.
So this is, we speaking of the Splinternet, and we'll gradually get there, but I'd like to take it in steps. Uh, Corporatism, integration of of transnational corporations and the military industrial sector into governance. Um, and in 2025, the largest the largest recipients of government subsidies is the Silicon Valley technocrats, the tech bros.
So that was. This is basically the playbook of the German interwar period. Okay, because what the Germans did was that um, they brought the engineers from companies and executives there to see in when they were doing their scenarios and so on, right?
Mhm.
Right. They brought them in so that they could see and they could understand how the technology was using, what the actual needs were, what the strategic needs were, etc.
Mhm.
Right?
Yes.
They understood that they had to integrate that, right? And yeah, even with pharmaceutical industries, etc. This is what they did, and then it changed the entire nature of its industrial and innovative ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
right? With the specifics of dual use. This phone that I am using, right, for that, my phone,
Mm.
all the technology of this is what came from the dual. It's all from the military. Okay.
Yes.
Um, the tech, and so we have to understand. We have to understand what the nature of these states are. Why do you think in places like Africa, etc., there is a hard ceiling on the types of loans and the types of technology transfer to become industrial in that way? Because it's known after the second, anybody who strategically studies these matters knows that is the way to military, economic, and regional power,
Yes.
right? Um, yeah. Well, we haven't really engaged with any of the questions. I think we've gone on for about an hour, nearly an hour. But the thing is that yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying that we have to understand that what we are seeing here. This is why we have to understand. This is why we have to understand things like industrial history. We have to look at
Mm-hmm.
military history
Mm-hmm.
in order to understand our world.
Mm.
You've got to be multidisciplinary.
Military history, industrial history, and of course the history of the secret services.
Yes, yes. Because somebody was asking, so what about Pan Africanism? Is this an invention of the CIA? No, Pan Africanism is not an invention of the CIA, but the CIA has at times, like the Soviet Union, tried to make sure that it could shape it, right? Shape its ideas, right? And people like Nkrumah understood that,
Very well. Very well.
right?
Very well. Got him
That's
in
why the
trouble.
CIA backed. That's why the CIA backed the 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 overthrow of him,
Oh
right?
yeah, definitely. With methods you can read up in the book by William Bloom called "Freeing the World to Death," where William Bloom lists various coups and coup attempts that he, as a CIA operative and secretary, oversaw the conceptualization of. And he published a book about the work he oversaw. And it's chapter after chapter after chapter of cases where he either reports what the CIA was planning or reports what he was involved in conceptualizing methods of overthrowing this or that um,
Hmm.
elected government deemed too close to socialism or too close to the Soviet Union or too close to success simply. Some
Hmm.
of these projects were thwarted because they were just becoming successful,
Yes, yes.
independent of, in the third way, in the non aligned movement. So,
But not only that they were becoming successful, but you they fit into an international. They fit into an imperial economy
mm,
in which they must produce raw materials, right? Ghana, if Ghana decides that it's not exporting raw cocoa
mm,
anymore
mm,
and is going to develop chocolate products
mm, by itself.
by itself,
How dare you?
how dare you? But you know what that means? That means that it's gonna have to, okay, it's Fulanis and their cows. It's gonna have to get interested in cow dairy technology, this, that, milk. Their whole ecosystems that come. And they must not be they must not even be allowed to think like that,
Mm,
right? They must not be allowed to think like that. And uh, and and coming back to like Ghana again and the CIA and the there was a story of the CIA honey trap, right?
mm-hmm,
Which will happen under Rawlings with his because he Rawlings had a head of intelligence whose name I
mm-hmm,
can't remember, who
Let me
trained
go
at
for it.
Sandhurst. Bloody brilliant,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he took down the he took down the entirety of CIA operations in Africa,
Mm.
right? He took down the entirety of it. Nobody talks about that, right? Because I often with people, like, I often hear them with a lot of defeatism. Right? But this
Mm.
guy, he took down the entirety of the CIA operations across Africa. They had to rebuild from scratch,
I'll
and
have
it
to
was
look for that.
it,
Yeah.
and it was and the agent who did it was Rawlins's cousin,
Mm.
right?
And the honey trap took him down.
Yeah, they used they honey trapped somebody working a black woman who was placed in Ghana, who was she was working for the CIA.
Can you just briefly summarize for our audience what a honey trap is? Because people need to know about this, depending on what your career is.
Honey trap is when you infiltrate using using love or just sex, right? So you make the person fall in love with you, and then you extract information from them.
And just as a footnote, I became aware of this practice by reading about Mordecai Vanunu, which is a spectacular case, which is an Israeli whistleblower who decided to tell the world, I believe in the 1980s it was, that
Mm-hmm.
Israel indeed had nuclear, uh, military grade nuclear
Mm-hmm.
weapons. And he was working at the Dimona plant, which is now internationally known as the Israeli plant where that type of weaponry armament is manufactured, which the Israeli government entirely neither confirms nor denies. They don't deny it; they neither confirm nor deny it. That particular language, and he was on his way out of the reach of the Israeli government, on his way into hiding when he was accosted at the airport in Rome on his
Mm-hmm.
way while fleeing. So basically, the lesson here is stay focused, ladies and gentlemen. Whatever, stay focused. If you're running away from a government trying to catch you, don't get yourself into entanglements looking at a lady with a particularly short skirt or a guy with a particularly, hairy chest or whatever it is that does it for you. Stay focused, you know. And this lady came to him, spoke to him, flirted with him. He fell for it, ended up
You ended up back
unconscious.
in Israel.
Exactly, in a hotel room, woke up in a cell, stayed there now for more than 18 years, and
Well,
has been.
no, he's free now, but he can't leave Israel
Exactly. So
and
that's a
become a
honey trap.
Christian. You know,
That's there's the quick the tale of a honey trap. And ever since I read that, I've become somewhat a little less sociable. Because if a lady speaks to me out of the blue, and I was profoundly doubt that this is of a natural occurrence. So why would you speak to me in particular? Maybe.
I think, and the other thing that you have to understand is that with um, because the United States in Africa used its a lot of its trade union members, etc.,
Mm,
to um, to to as operatives in the in Africa, across Africa,
mm-hmm,
right? And many of them, most of them, most of them were black. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
and and the thing about it is that, oh, I think we just have to, again, we must understand the nature of the modern state beyond ideology. We must understand it as an institution of bio and power. That's it. That's the nature of the analysis. Somebody Salem is talking about strategically dropping pests on northern European forests after World War II, so chemical industry would have a civilian market per report of eyewitnesses, right? Because
Never heard of that.
bec-
Yeah.
okay, because I'm not going to deal with it. I'm going to step back because what basically happened is that you have you have this kind of machinery which then becomes so integrated with the state and with the military, etc., that you start to run experiments, right? It's a natural. It's you know you run experiments because you have the means to do it, and it gives you a business edge because and it builds depth in your industrial capacity. Sorry, yeah.
No. So just let this last sentence you said breathe. Let's let this last sentence work in people's minds. Once the capability is set up and it is built, and I can tell you and I can confirm that in all my years as a researcher, um, the framework of the political science department not only didn't include research into the architecture and the let's say the global architecture or state architecture of any specific case of the Secret Service apparatus. Not only did it not include that, it
Hmm.
also didn't even include the history, the study of the history of Secret Service operations that have become known and transparent. And once you understand that this political architecture exists, it exists and it's operative and it gets a budget every year. And they are operating in secret and they have agendas and they're
Hmm.
conducting research, experimentation, etc., etc. And it is all removed from the public eye. That questions at a fundamental level the qualification of democracy. If you qualify a political system as a democracy, but there's huge amounts of budgeted money going into a domain that is entirely removed from transparency and public scrutiny and public discussion.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm not that interested in that because you're interested in the ideological justifications. I'm not. I want to see how power works, right? I not, as we say, as some people say, they say if he has an asshole, he's going to fart, right? I.e., that people will say and they will talk. Well, they will tell stories. I'm not interested in the stories. I
Hmm.
am interested in how it works,
The
right?
outcome of a system indicates to you exactly what the system is supposed to do.
Yeah, I'm literally not interested in any way on its, because people will go, oh, well, that's not democracy. Well, I don't care what it is. I want to know how it works. I don't want to call it, if you can call it a zebra if you want.
Mm.
I just want to see what it does.
The empirical reality of what you are observing, what's under scrutiny.
Yeah. The
Well,
rest of that, the rest,
you
the rest of the noise just doesn't allow me to see.
exactly. There's noise to be able to distinguish the noise from the empirical, you know, data, the facts, the things that can be
Hmm.
observed and reported upon intersubjectively. And I believe that the veil that the Secret Service apparatus casts upon some of the most uh, uh, some
Okay.
of, pardon me.
L- No, 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 no. Somebody, Surya.
Hmm.
So I have to comment. In quality control standards from the military are used, such as MIL STD 105D. Right.
Guess what's on my research screen here? I've never looked into that, and I will be looking into that. I have it on my screen right here. Let me
Okay.
see.
So the use of statistics, right? in statecraft was really developed by the Swedes.
By the Swedes.
Yeah, right. Um,
Not
and
surprised.
and it feeding into strategic doctrine was really again developed by the Swedes. The Swedes
Mm.
provided the basic template.
Mm.
Yeah, and and so you'll find that Scandinavia really dominates in statistical analysis. But what became clear is that um, once statistics became um, became a technology of statecraft,
Mm-hmm.
then what we have to understand is that that means that the technology of statecraft then has to become standardized, because statistics is a technology for abstracting the chaotic aspects of the world in a way that you can count and make predictions, right?
Can you link this? Can you
Very
link
dramatic.
this particular aspect? Can you link this particular aspect? Um, Not necessarily to the British government's type of politics that's been going on for the past since Thatcher, but generally speaking.
Look, this is in the manufacture of the modern state.
Mm-hmm.
This becomes central to it from like the late 19th century. So we're talking the late 1800s, right?
Mm-hmm.
20th century, right? Dominates, military dominates, right? Because statistically, statistics became central to working out whether you could afford to fight the war, right? When the Americans were in Vietnam and they realized that the Vietnamese could keep just doing what they were doing for a damn long time, right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the rate they were doing it, it looked as if they had done statistical analysis and they knew that they could do it ad infinitum,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Because they were not losing people beyond their capacity to produce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when the Americans saw that, they realized that they had to extract themselves out of this morass that they had placed themselves in. Yeah.
Can you connect that to the development of the internet, for instance? So from there we slide into the Splinternet, and from there perhaps some.
Well, well, part of it is about about the technologies for the standardization of the world. Because what happens is that in psychopolitics, once you can imagine the world in these ways, right? So that um, then it changes the way that you imagine the technology for the control and the technique for controlling the world. So sometimes when I use technology, I'm also including technique. I'm not separating, because often people think of technology
Strictly
as this
objects.
discrete item, right? No, it's not. Technology is not only the item, but the way that you imagine its usage and the way you interact with it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which becomes its technique basis, right? So a technology cannot be separated from its technique, right? And that cannot be separated from its social imagination. So how do we imagine it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this technology of statistics, then it allows you to um to imagine. Yeah. Sorry.
Just a footnote. I hope you didn't buy that device you were holding up. That looks like it has the size of a page. I hope you didn't buy it from anything Yossi Cohen had his hand in. I don't know if you've picked up the interview he gave, the former Mossad head, that is, interview he gave last week, or at least it's been making its round last week, where he was pointing out that as the head of the Mossad, he had his hands in manipulating technological devices across the world.
Well, I when I saw that, I shook my head, because Napoleon always said, when your enemy is making a strategic error,
Hmm.
he's making a mistake, do not interrupt him. Now,
Good.
what the Israelis, the Israelis are proving themselves
Mm.
to be um, a, a strategic hindrance, right? They're not they because tactically, I can see why they did it.
Hmm.
Okay,
Across the world in all types of countries, he said. Whether he's bluffing or telling the truth, it is still a
but
problematic.
in broad strategic terms, what it has done is that it has cast question to all of the Western technological ecosystem at the time we can least accept it, and it has no consequences. This this is not shooting yourself in the foot with a machine gun, right? This is nuking your foot. It's stupid. It's so strategically. It the, the Israelis are fools, right? And at the end of this, within the next 20 years,
Mm.
they are going to face such a backlash from their own allies. They're 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 stupid, unbelievably stupid, but clever. And that's the worst kind of that's the worst kind of jackass you can have.
It's a tactical win and a strategic blunder.
Yeah, it's utter blunder. And I was surprised that nobody came out and said that.
There's
Right? But
been nothing. There's been nothing about it anywhere. Well,
yeah.
there's been a reporting about that statement, but there's been no kind of, sort of reaction to it from an analytical point of view of what are we doing with this information, ladies and gentlemen?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
Yossi Cohen, it was, I believe, Yossi Cohen.
Yeah.
I said,
'Cause I remember reading that. I was going, just like, and you allowed them to say that? Are you fools? Right?
it,
And you're moving to regionalism, and you're gonna so when people talking about the deep state and the this that and everything's joined up.
mm.
This is not joined up thinking, right? This is not joined up thinking.
But maybe it could be a tactical ploy in the sense of the mad dog, the unpredictable dog,
Yes,
the
but that's precisely what they're doing. But they're shooting their allies, and they're in and that industrial. Nobody after that statement, nobody can trust
mm.
this Israeli technology strategically.
Is
None.
is this one of the core factors of the second part of our title? The death of globalism, the death of trust in allies, death of trust in cooperative consistency. If I
Um,
can't trust you not to place bombs and explosives in my technological devices,
yeah, I think we're gonna have to do a part two to this one because
hmm,
we're not gonna get there.
okay, I'm forcing it. I have to do something moderated into that, but
Yeah, yeah.
but but
No,
it's sort of
and I'm blaming you.
no, but it clicks. It kind of clicks that if you kill trust to that degree, if you kill trust to that degree, if you instill fear into patterns of interaction, you have the antithesis of cooperative sort of.
No, you see what they need. What here's the problem. The you need a Western based technological ecosystem,
Yes.
and then you also need a China, and then you also already have a Chinese centered
Mm-hmm.
technological ecosystem,
Yes. The Pax Sinica.
the Pax Sinica.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, what the Israelis have just done is they didn't drop a load of shit on it. What they did is they did the hippopotamus move. They kind of they sprayed it everywhere, right? There's those Western, those American gangsters
Mm.
with a Tommy gun, right?
Yes.
They just shit on everything, right? And 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 nobody. It's like there were no strategic minds out there looking at this and going, "Well, you cannot say that." right?
Mm-hmm.
And where is the discipline?
Mm-hmm.
And they're not being disciplined,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that I'm saying that the people who now remain within the Pax Americana
Mm-hmm.
are going to be, they're just going to get increasingly skittish because what has happened is that the constitutive anxieties have now been baked in. So you can predict what's going to happen.
Oh my God! And
Right.
we are dealing with, and we dealt about with this in some of our previous conversations, exploring the hidden architecture of politics in particular, when we
Mm-hmm,
talked about these archetypes of cognitive positionalities as developed from infancy, and then also sort of as can be identified as defining civilizational modes
mm-hmm,
of coping with reality. And when I say civilizational, I mean what you termed in that paper macro cosmic, and
mm-hmm,
macro political modes of operation, where we talked about the schizophrenic cognitive mode um, uh, of coping and managing with the world, managing the world around us, and managing complexity. And
mm-hmm,
if there's any accuracy to this observation, or to this, there's this heuristic claim that
mm-hmm,
Western civilization is profoundly profoundly wedded to the schizophrenic paranoid mode of interacting with complexity. If there's any truth to that claim, what does this information do in such a cognitive model of coping with reality?
well, basically, what it does is that it has produced a sense of you're either with us or against us. If you criticize us, then you're against us, right? So then it reduces strategic flexibility.
In a world defined as we are right and you're dead.
Yeah, at a time that you need strategic flexibility, at that point you're
For closing.
you're just foreclosing it, right? Why? Because you're reactive, right? And
Do you
so
know?
so mm,
Do you know why I think this just reminds me of something? I think there's a reason, there's a vantage point from which such statements can be made with hubris, with hubristic confidence. That
yeah.
is the vantage point that quantifies and compares vulnerabilities and invulnerabilities, and has the assumption that the power differential at the military point, where the US has 960 billion, that's where the 960 billion is, annual military budget to invest in armaments and in defensive capabilities and offensive capabilities, and that one is a part of that system. If one has that vantage point, one might be led to think one is invulnerable. Therefore, one would make such claims, and sort of poo-poo and disbelieve your stance, which is you have just created the the f- the foundation
The
of your own erosion. They would say,
the
no, we're too big to fail.
the error of the Northern Europeans has always been that they have a tendency to think that they are inherently superior, and as a result, others um, cannot produce what they produced or surpass it. They made that error with China. They did not learn,
Mm.
right?
Huawei.
When it when
Mhm.
because when they went with China, they said, no, the Chinese can't do that. They can only they can only copy,
They can only
right?
copy. They can only
Yeah,
copy and steal copyrights.
yeah. So then so, but this tendency here is we are now heading into a world that is breaking with with the symbolic hegemony that that the Europeans had.
Mm-hmm.
It's right. So people are exploring other ways of governing.
Mm-hmm.
It's now on the table that there are other paths to industrial, high tech, developed economies,
Yes.
and at this point is the point to begin to ratchet back on those kinds of strategic errors and to really address the fact that you're going to be dealing with a lot more complex world, right? With Iran doesn't have an air force, all right, or a significant air force.
Yes.
Look at what it just did,
Mhm. In June,
right?
June of 2025. Yes.
Yeah, in what they call the 12-day war,
Mm-hmm.
which was a 12 days it began. The Israelis came out like a featherweight to the quick, and then the Iranians went boom,
Mm-hmm.
right, and everybody had to rush in to help them, and still it was not enough.
This is empirical. This is facts. You've moved from the visual image comparison metaphor into the facts. France was involved. Uh, who else? The
Germany
UK
was
was
involved.
involved. Germany was involved, and the US.
Australia was involved.
Yes. So
Jordan was involved. Egypt was involved.
Jordan
Saudi
was involved.
Arabia was involved. Right? Everybody, even the Turks, right? They weren't thing, but there were flyovers that
Mm-hmm.
seem only possible if they had passed by Turkish air, right?
Yeah.
At least the Turks knew and did. The question is whether they warned the Iranians.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's another question.
That is
Your
another
point,
question, but that is the question of the vulnerability, invulnerability realities.
yes. So, so, so that the Israelis, contrary to their imagination, are becoming more and more dependent upon um, cooperation.
And then you drop such a thing.
Right? That's what I'm saying. Right? At the same time, the Ansarullah in Yemen
Mm-hmm. Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
just made
An
just
announcement.
made first of all, it chased the NATO coalition out of the Red Sea,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because and I mean literally the Italians went, no, we're going home. We can't handle this, right? The Americans went back by themselves.
Yes.
And they eventually had to say, no, we're going home. We can't handle this, right? So a country that doesn't have a navy just basically defeated, right? And this is and this is strategic because everybody everybody expects blood in military conflict. No, this was that the military objective could not be achieved and they had to retreat,
Mm.
right? And they retreated, calling it a victory, right?
This is
Now,
an
whenever
American
you
special.
see an army retreat with they have to make a retreat and they call it a victory, then you know the depth of the strategic defeat.
Yes.
That is an indicator, that is a data point to the depth of the strategic defeat. So all I'm saying is that in this environment, you can this is the point that you could least afford having a jackass like the Israelis in your corner shitting on everything. Right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's literally what's happened. They have they have annihilated the West soft power completely. From now on, in order to get what they want, they have to give better terms on loans or they have to have bigger guns.
Mm.
Right? Because people are looking at them, they're going, you did that? And you're involved in Sudan too. And you're involved in Congo.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's
Mm-hmm.
seen it. And I'm going, nah. Right? And That's why I say when you see your enemy make a mistake, don't intervene. The Russians and the Chinese are not doing anything to stop them. Why you think they're not doing anything to stop them? The Russians do not need an end to the war in Ukraine. They don't need it. They early on they were negotiating, they were willing to offer it, but now they don't need it. The Ukrainians need it. The longer they stay there under the current stances, unless the Europeans can somehow make some miracle,
Mm-hmm.
right? The longer they stay in war is the more territory the Ukrainians have, and the less negotiating capacity position they have. It just destroys the negotiating position,
Mm-hmm.
right? Zelensky can't afford to have elections, right? Much less, yeah. No, it's it, so strategically. As long as the West continues to play this game, it's just losing. It's just hemorrhaging soft power, and the biggest wound for that, right? It's not a wound that they're piping it off and pumping it out. Is Israel, and it's genocide in Gaza. So the Chinese and the Russians, all they have to do is hold their hands up and say, well, look, we tried to veto them, we tried to do this, right, and do nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. Sorry. I'm trying to keep up. And I say, so you put that picture up. Are you talking about the defeat of the British Army in against that picture was the one.
Elizabeth Thompson, defeat of an army.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually just sort of, as we're talking about this, I have in my mind, there's this sentence going on that I'm listening to you, Alex, and I hear that you have sort of cast your lens, your intellectual lens, to the feet of the giant. And everything you say seemed to indicate that there is some clayishness about those feet. And as as our media keeps on bloviating about AI and AI investment and the 500, what is it they're investing there? Uh, half a trillion.
But they're not talking about the structural matters that they need to address.
So I sort of was just pointing with these visuals to some of the clayish aspects of the giant's feet in history. And the Afghan debacle of the British Empire was one. This Saigon image of the fleeing empire is one. You will remember the more recent retreat of the
Afghanistan.
US. Pardon me? Yes, with
Afghanistan. Yeah. Almost
absolutely.
exactly like the photo.
With humans falling out of planes, if you
Mm,
sadly remember. So there is something about the pretense of invulnerability that historical empiricism kind of undercuts a little bit.
mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
we-
So, but and I hope he answered the question that you had about the photo, about the picture. Yeah.
the painting is from Elizabeth Thompson. I always forget the year. Let me see if I can pull it up. Uh, it's 1879. It shows William Bryden, the sole survivor of the army who left Kabul for Jalalabad. And this, yes, that painting is Remnants of an Army by Elizabeth Thompson, 1879. And I find it significant. I find it a warning, uh, uh, insufficiently heeded about where hubris will lead you, not because you have a weak army, not because you don't have the capabilities, but because the assumption of invulnerability uh, sort of doesn't measure up to reality,
Yes.
especially right. And I feel Alex is pointing out to some of the clay of the giant's feet, the giant's footing.
Yeah. Yeah. And somebody. Okay. So Surya was highlighting the fact that she was not going to buy a Samsung phone again because some of the Israeli software installed natively cannot be removed. You see, this is exactly what's going right there that I'm talking about. And so then Erin Naima is going, thank you guys. What software? I thought it was iPhone. I just thought a refurbished Samsung because bought a refurbished because my phone's dying. No, this is the point. The whole ecosystem, those is now compromised
Mhm.
by this actor who's completely, they're clever, but they're just complete jackasses.
What
Right?
about your
Um,
soda stream? What about your soda stream? Do you, after hearing the head of Mossad saying we've manipulated all types of devices all over the place, any country, just think of any country, any
yeah.
type of device.
So,
Are
so
you
all
keeping
of
your
those,
soda
so,
stream device?
so all of the all of, see what has happened is that it places this kind of doubt on anything from within the Western ecosystem. So
Hmm.
where you think people are going to be ordered? The Chinese are not under that, right?
Hmm.
So that's where it's going to come. That's what's going to happen. And if they get sullied by that, they're going to stamp down on the Israelis like nothing, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so this is no, no, this is what I'm saying, that the Chinese ecosystem, that regional ecosystem, is devoid of that, Yusuf. So that's the problem,
Well, well,
right?
well, 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 well. Are we sure? Because I understand that some of the devices, Huawei, etc., have inbuilt back doors for whatever reason and purpose. So,
No, 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 they do,
yeah.
right? Because
And,
all technology are coming out of any of those ecosystems always has that,
mm,
right? As I
mm-hmm,
said to you, as I took you back to the Nazis
mm,
to show you how dual use, the Chinese are talking about dual use, right?
mm,
This is the logic of modern developed states. Don't think that anybody is not
it,
subject to that. But the deliberate sabotage of the equipment for strategic um, benefit, that
mm.
is what the jackasses have introduced. Those Zionist jackasses have introduced, right? That's the problem. Yeah.
Well,
I'm trying to think. Yeah. Okay. There's a certain irony in the nature of empires, a paradox that sees their all own undoing. Yes, because when you get the apple, it look nice, but the apple rots from inside. Is it rots from what is in it, right? It carries the means of its own destruction, and that's the nature of the world. When we die, we rot from inside.
mm.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting it. Which is the country again in Asia that
Sorry, it's 12:02. I have to.
Oh, yes. I also have my alarm informing us that we've reached, and before we make a hard cut, could you perhaps, um, in light of the last points you just raised, how do these connect with the end of globalism and the splinternet as a rounded up?
So basically, what I'm saying is that strategically, the U.S. as the leader of the West will only be able to maintain its leadership by a redesign and a regional redesign. So I'm saying that what you're seeing in Venezuela, etc., and West Africa, all of that is now about this strategic redesign of the world as a regionalism. So globalism is done, right? Different standards, etc. Now, at the same time, that's why I'm calling the Israelis jackasses, because strategically they know this, right? And they're doing what they're doing because who's yes, like the guy who's gonna stop me? You gonna stop me, right? And you're just watching him and you're cool, and then he jumps, right? But you were ready for him, he's not ready for you,
Mm,
right? They're just it's a level of strategic behavior which is asinine, right? And it just everything they have done has undermined the necessary soft power for this regionalism. So people are going to have to enter the regionalism with their hands twisted,
Mm-hmm. That's
right?
it. Mm-hmm.
So that's the problem.
The
And
Splinternet aspect.
so out of this the underpin
Mm-hmm.
for um, a a a technological ecosystem
Yes.
which also intersects with the cultural one is the internet, right? It's the basis of fintech, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
that what we're going to see is that this the how whoever has Hawaii equipment in their network is not going to be permitted into the American one. So this divergence is there. The AI standardization of the Chinese system is way ahead of the American one.
Mm.
That's way, 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 way ahead. They've got they are problem power,
Mm-hmm.
they are problem water, but they're looking at
Mm.
other ways of cleaning it. Where they're looking at doing underwater
Data center
data
cooling.
centers, etc.,
Mm.
to address the issue because China has a serious water issue.
Mm.
Um, but the point I'm making here is that this split is now occurring with serious issues by uh, generated by an ally that's not the ally is not even in NATO, etc. I mean, and 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 it's just shit on everything. Right? I'm sorry about no, I'm not sorry about that. That's what they've done. They just shut on everything.
Born
And
out of a syndrome of trauma and paranoia in extremis.
well, I know right now we have to stop that. We have to stop making extreme excuses for them because there was a point at which the trauma we understand where they came from, right? But when you're going to prosecute somebody because they expose rape, a culture of rape in your and torture in your prisons, then you're complicit. Forget that. Forget your trauma.
It makes no sense. I mean,
You have to forget the trauma at that point, right?
the
It's
fact
not
that
admissible anymore. You have to stop that monster.
but from a psychoanalysis perspective, you being traumatized might be the fuel for you
No, we
traumatizing.
understand that. Well, no, we understand that. But you're telling me,
The
anybody.
dialectical
No, no.
complexity
When
of
you
that.
when you when you move to the point where you're inflicting the kinds of things that com- you that you hold as your historical trauma upon another people, but you're not only doing it, but you're accelerating the rate at which you do it, right? Then at that point we can no longer use your trauma as an excuse,
But
right?
it is a
You
but as
moved
a diagnosis. But as a diagnosis,
as a diagnosis, yes,
it
but
stands.
at the point the prognosis of this situation is that unless somebody stops you, you're not going to stop, right? So they have entered the zone at which they have to be exposed to a carceral continuum of some sort, right? If not, it has carceral consequences for the entire Western and um, the entire Western regional system.
Hmm.
Okay,
We're talking
out of which
OECD,
some of which they
basically.
will not be able to dig themselves out of,
Hmm.
and they are just accruing that by never daring to put some discipline on this creature. Right? It is it is it is simply the greatest strategic defeat by victory I have seen. This is, when they talk about a Pyrrhic victory,
Yes, that's it.
right?
That's
There
what's.
is, yeah, this is, they
But
will continue to slaughter Palestinians. and they want because they want to deal with the demographic. But as they do it, they bring down an entire imperial system. All right. Okay.
This is
Okay. Well,
this
uh,
this has been quite powerful.
so have I
Quite.
answered that question about why it's related? I think
It
I
is.
did.
We've touched on it enough, and this is perhaps an invitation to all of you that are in here that have had the endurance of sticking with this conversation until now, to join us again next Wednesday, Greenwich Mean Time, always 10 a.m. And 11 European Standard Time. And wherever you are in the world, try to figure it out how that relates, and we'd love to see you again in here, have these conversations. Today, I failed to read the comments. We always try to integrate the comments. And if
I was doing that. Don't worry.
oh, thank you, thank you. If you so inclined, follow us, subscribe to us. It's free. You can, of course, subscribe also with a subscription contribution to further the independence. But we are here. We're doing this because these kinds of thoughts have been moving us, and we've been talking about the dystopian nature of the reality that we live in, and how to position ourselves in it, and how to move aware,
Hmm.
consciously. Now, with that being said, please have a look at the archives, at the texts that Alex has written over the past 2 years. It's quite a number. There's a book coming now on, if you wish to share the title.
It's about psychopolitics. It's you. I use Lacanian psychoanalysis
Hmm.
to read the political. So a lot of what you see, you're hearing me is really my application of Lacan's work. Lacan, Foucault, Achille Mbembe, and necropolitics.
And
A
you
lot of Fanon, right? So
and
it's really this
yes.
integrates. It's a book about giving you an insight into how I arrive at those things and why the psychoanalytic of Lacan is really applicable to the political.
Mm,
Right.
mm, mm. And I've learned an immense amount, and I can only recommend to our audience to really plow through the papers that you've written, the historical review you did about Syria. For anyone who isn't familiar with how that region came to be after the Sykes-Picot Agreement, how that region has come to be after the Balfour Agreement, to anyone who doesn't quite know where to put their foot in terms of what's coming. Is it a multilateral? Uh, 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 what's the word I'm looking for? Is it a polar world? Are we moving into multipolarity? Are we moving into bipolarity? For anyone who hasn't really found out where to put their foot in these conversations, you'll find plenty of material in the archives of Dystopia Unmasked. And that about ends my outro for today, with gratitude to those who stuck with us throughout this conversation today.
And Aaron Naima is saying, I need to start with the basics before I try to read that. What should I read? I say just go into the um you could do this. This is one thing. Go back to the beginning when I started
Mm-hmm.
and start reading.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I think by the time you've read about 5 articles, you can just bounce around because the
And
basic
and
ideas. Yeah.
and here's the beautiful thing that really is, I think, I don't know if it's a USP in terms of a unique selling point, but it is definitely an endearing point about how you write, Alex. It's extremely unorthodox from an academic point of view, in that it is, it's accessible, it's personal. Just to remind those of you who remember, maybe there was a moment where you had a fever, and you just come out of the fever, and you published the musings in an organized way that you had during your fever. So your fever dreams organized in clarity, in
Hmm.
lucidity, in hindsight. That's not what you expect an academic to do, at least not to be honest about it.
Hmm.
No, because sometimes when you read, what is it? who is it I'm thinking of? When you read some Habermas or when you read some sociologists, you might think this was written in a fever dream, but they never tell you.
I'm looking for my friend. Hold on.
So I'm saying all of this just to say that the reading is very
My
accessible.
good friends who I'm pretty sure were stoned when they were writing this. It's excellent work. Right.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so the
All right.
writing is free, is liberated from um, those aspects of academic reflection that I would qualify as pretense. The way you write is liberated from the pretense of academia and full of the poetic swing that you've taken liberty to integrate into your writing. And I think that makes fun reading.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to close after this. But look, when I saw what was going on, I saw the failure of our academic output. We just could not answer. So I really at that point had to sit down and think. I said, okay, how am I going to approach this in a way that escapes the kinds of foreclosures,
Mm.
unnecessary disavowals, right?
Mm.
That from so I began to think of another way of doing um of engaging with intellectual output,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Or what Gramsci would call knowledge production. I didn't even stay within the confines of philosophy in that way, right? So I make philosophical statements, but they're not within the boundaries of philosophy,
Mhm.
right? They don't follow that position of deep abstraction um, that Western philosophy follows, right? I felt that where we had gotten to in terms of our of our intellectual tradition, it could not produce the kind of transformation that we needed, that was necessary for academics to come out utterly and just shut down the whole system in the face of what we were seeing, what we knew from week two was going to be a genocide, right? And any academic who had studied Stalingrad um, and and the, and and the history of war in
And
the 20th
concentration
century,
camps.
yeah,
Concentration camps. You knew there were going to be diseases. You knew this was going to lead to typhus and I don't know what else. You know, this is
yes, right.
it's
So I said no, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not even going there. This has to be something new. So what would that be? And this is my attempt at traversing that space.
mm,
Right. It's an attempt.
it's an
Right.
effort at coping with reality as it has presented itself in this unpalatable way.
Yeah. And a lot of in that I am really um inspired by Euripides. Right. Because Euripides would critique would seriously try and it show in theater the hubris and the issues of the Athenian democracy that had actually become an empire
Mm-hmm.
and took tribute and was brutal in putting down. If you didn't turn up with your tribute or you rebelled, they were brutal. They came in, they killed the men, and they sold the women and the children into slavery.
Well,
Yeah. And they had issues with the outsider, right? And so um yeah, they're quite xenophobic actually. Yeah. And so Euripides really addressed that in his work.
mm,
So I was trying to bring some of that kind of energy to the table. Yeah. All right.
until next week. when it is time for Dystopia Unmasked and having conversations off the cuff. And I hope it is as enriching for the audience as it is for me to plow through your angles and perspectives and vantage points and, as you call it, explorations of the reality surrounding us.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back now to my exploration of innovation and those warriors. Yeah, I think it's been a really generative. So if anybody else is looking there, then please and thank you for taking the time to listen through. And apologies for the way that we've gone around. We actually haven't properly addressed the title, but I think what we'll do is do a part 2 next week.
Wonderful. Looking forward to that.
Okay, guys. Pleasure.
Bye bye.
You take it. Bye.